The sprinklers came on like clockwork in Wellington Oaks, whispering over manicured lawns and washing the last heat from a late summer evening. Porch lights clicked alive in a staggered pattern up and down the cul-de-sac, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and grill smoke. Karen stood at her front window with the blinds tilted just enough to see the street without being seen. Habit, she would have told you. Preparedness, she sometimes called it. Neighborhood pride, when she wanted it to sound noble. A sedan idled at the curb 2 houses down, a model she didn't recognize, the kind of detail her mind snagged on. The man beside it had his back to her, tall and broad-shouldered under a light jacket. He bent at the driver's side door with something in his hand, maybe a penlight, maybe a tool. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't looking around like someone who felt watched. That confidence bothered her more than anything. Karen checked the time, 8:11 p.m., and tried to place the car. The Hendersons were out of town. They'd posted the airport photo in the community Facebook group that morning. That left the McKees, the elementary school couple with the twins. They drove a minivan, blue, always with soccer decals. The sedan wasn't theirs. Across the street, the O'Brien's golden retriever barked once and then settled, a loose punctuation to the scene. The man straightened, wrote something on a small pad, and moved to the rear of the car, angling the light to the license plate. Karen told herself what she always told herself. This is what responsible people do. You notice. You act. She remembered the map on her Crime Watch app. The pins clustered in neighborhoods like a rash. Theft from vehicles one after another. She remembered the post last week about a break-in 3 blocks over. Happened so fast. She'd left a comment under it with 3 exclamation marks and a prayer emoji, and then felt a little silly but also affirmed. Silent gratitude flickered through her for her own vigilance. This small task she performed nightly, a sentry behind the blinds. The man leaned into the car again. Karen's jaw tightened. She could have walked outside and asked a question. She could have called the McKees. She could have snapped a picture and posted it and watched the comments roll in. Instead, she picked up the phone. 911, what's your emergency? Hi. Her voice came out thinner than she expected. She cleared her throat. There's someone suspicious on my street. He's, looking into a car. What's the address, ma'am? She gave it. The dispatcher repeated it back, calm and precise, like reading coordinates over open water. Tell me exactly what you see. He's at a gray sedan in front of 214. He's shining a light on the plate, and now he's checking the door. He's been out there 10 minutes. Do you know the person? A neighbor? No. Karen's hand pressed against the cool window pane. He doesn't look like he lives here. A pause on the line. What makes you say that? Karen felt something defensive bristle in her. She pictured how this would read in a transcript. She pictured her own face if someone asked her later. She could hear her mother's voice. Careful. I know my neighbors, she said, which was true enough to sound like truth. I haven't seen him before. Can you describe him? Tall, jacket, dark jeans. She swallowed. Black. Is he holding any weapons? I can't see any. Any other details? Tattoos? Facial hair? He's got a short haircut. The man turned his head slightly as if listening, and for a moment Karen thought he was looking straight at her. Her heart struck her ribs. He just wrote something down. He's still there. Okay. Officers are on their way. Please stay inside. Do not approach. The call ended and Karen stood very still with the phone in her hand, the room dense with the sound of her own breathing. The house had begun to cool. The air conditioning clicked and hummed. In the hallway, the family photos caught a slice of light. School pictures, a wedding portrait, a beach shot with everyone squinting at the ocean. She imagined telling her husband when he got home from his late shift, how she had handled it, how she had kept them safe. He'd tell her she did the right thing. He always did. Outside, the man was still working. He moved like someone who owned his time, methodical, unhurried, assured of his place. The certainty rubbed at Karen like sand in a shoe. She told herself it was the brazenness of it that got to her. She told herself it was courage to call, not fear. You're not like those people, she whispered, without specifying who those people were. You're careful. Across the cul-de-sac, the McKees' porch light flickered on. A neighbor's screen door creaked. The small, interconnected machine of suburban life began to stir. Karen recognized Darlene stepping onto her porch in slippers and a robe, craning her neck for the source of the disturbance that hadn't fully started yet. Karen leaned closer to the blinds, complicit with the darkness in keeping her hidden. On the street, the man paused at the sedan's rear quarter panel. He scanned the top edge of the glass, the kind of slow, thorough inspection that suggests he wasn't guessing. When he took a step back, the motion threw the porch light across his face. He was younger than Karen had first thought. There was no smirk, no swagger, just concentration, then a small, tired exhale. He knew he was being watched. Karen felt rather than understood that, and something hot and stubborn rose in her. He shouldn't be here. Not like this. Not now. Not when the Hendersons were out of town, when the news was full of stories that started exactly this way. She pictured a headline, "Another theft in Wellington Oaks." She pictured the comments, "Where were the neighbors?" She pictured her own name floating in that stream of blame, and she recoiled. Her phone buzzed. A text from Darlene. "You seeing this?" Karen typed back with quick fingers. "Already called. Police on the way." Three dots bloomed, vanished, bloomed again. "Good," Darlene sent. "Looks shady." Karen's shoulders loosened. Agreement is its own anesthesia. She had once taken the free Citizens Academy course at the station, 3 Thursday nights and a Saturday ride-along that made her queasy with the sway of the cruiser. The officer guiding her through had said, "We rely on eyes. You're out there when we can't be." She'd written that down in a notebook with a navy cover and the city seal on it. She kept the notebook in a kitchen drawer under the warranties, an artifact of righteousness. She reminded herself of that now, while the man at the car, black, alone, under other people's porch lights, kept doing his quiet, deliberate work. From down the block came the faint, unmistakable wail of a siren rising onto the grid of their neighborhood. It wasn't blaring yet. It felt like a throat clearing 2 streets away. The man didn't move. He capped his pen, slipped it into his jacket, and took one measured breath. He looked up at the Hendersons' dark windows as if he could see through them, and then toward Karen's house, where she had flattened herself against the wall out of reflex. For an absurd second, she imagined he could see the pale triangle of her face, the angle of her wrist, the slat of light across her cheekbone. The notion embarrassed her, as if she'd been caught half-dressed. The siren sharpened as it turned onto their street, suddenly very present, the way a storm feels when it finally breaks above you. Lights strobed blue and red against garage doors, and the wide, blank faces of SUVs and driveways. Darlene's dog barked for real this time, alarm layered on instinct. Karen stepped back from the window. Relief came first, sharp, almost giddy, followed by a slower flutter of doubt. The dispatcher's pause replayed in her mind. What makes you say that? It wasn't an accusation. It was a mirror, and she didn't like what it reflected. In the next room, the television murmured the end of a game show. Karen picked up the remote and muted it. In the sudden hush, every neighborhood sound was amplified. The tires crunching gently against the curb as the cruiser pulled up, the metallic clack of a car door, a radio crackling with clipped voices. Somewhere a baby cried for 3 seconds and then was soothed. Someone's wind chimes shivered. Karen pressed her palm to her chest, as if to quiet the organ that had been marching out of time. She glanced at the family portrait again, the practiced symmetry of smile and posture, and thought about the low-level hum that had lived inside her for months now, the one that had her scanning the headlines before bed, the one that made her check the door twice, then a third time. It had started during the protests 2 summers back, when the news had been heat and sirens, when she'd stood in this same window and watched a handful of teenagers walk past with signs and loud, earnest voices. She had wanted to believe she was the kind of person who could have joined them, or at least waved, a gesture toward common ground. But she had stayed inside then, too. On the street, an officer said, "Evening," loud enough for the cul-de-sac to hear. The man by the sedan turned slowly, his hands visible, empty, open at his sides. He didn't look frightened. He looked tired. Karen recognized that finally. Not defiance, not arrogance. An exhaustion so practiced it was almost a skill. Her phone buzzed again. A different thread this time, the HOA chat leaping awake. Anyone else hear sirens? What's going on? Karen watched the three dots dance, messages stacking. She didn't answer. She'd started the thing rolling. Now it had its own momentum. The cruiser's hood glowed under the streetlight, and the world narrowed to a triangle. Officers at the apex, the man at the base, the neighbors at their windows, dozens of invisible eyes making angles of judgment. Karen wrapped both hands around her phone to keep from ringing them. She could just make out the officers' hands near their belts, the practiced choreography of caution. She told herself again that she had done the right thing. Outside, the sprinklers cycled off in a series of clicks, leaving the grass beaded and dark, the air briefly heavier for the silence they left behind. A moth tapped at the glass beside Karen's cheek, frantic and aimless. She flinched, then laughed at herself, a brittle sound in her own ears. The evening had shifted into something it hadn't been 10 minutes before. A stage with lights, an audience, a script none of them admitted to knowing by heart. Karen couldn't see the man's face clearly anymore. Only the line of his shoulders, the pendulum of his breath, and she felt, against her will, the prickle of edge cases her course instructors had warned about, the situations that look one way and turn out another. She didn't step away, though. She stayed at the window, held there by a mixture of duty and dread, as the officers approached the man and the cul-de-sac held its collective breath. The badge she could not yet see waited in his jacket, as inevitable as the next beat of her heart. The hum of the neighborhood changed when the police cruiser turned onto Wellington Oaks Drive. What had been a quiet street of sprinklers and televisions behind curtains became a stage. The red and blue strobes washed over white garage doors and brick facades, pulling neighbors out of their routines. Karen felt a swell of justification. From behind her blinds, she watched two officers step out of the car, both white men with the posture of authority. Their hands hovered near their belts, cautious but ready. She whispered, almost proud, "I knew it. I was right to call." The man by the sedan straightened. He raised his hands slowly, palms visible. The porch lights caught his face. Strong features, short hair, eyes that looked not startled but weary. He moved without panic, like someone who had rehearsed this choreography too many times in his life. "Sir, step away from the vehicle," one of the officers commanded. The man obeyed, backing from the sedan with measured calm. Inside her house, Karen's pulse quickened. She was half thrilled, half afraid. Her husband would tell her she had done the right thing, she thought. The neighborhood would thank her. And yet, something in the man's calmness unsettled her. He did not look like a thief. He looked like someone used to being accused. The air was thick with waiting. Neighbors opened doors, some stepping onto porches with crossed arms. The O'Brien's dog barked. A baby began to cry down the block. The cruiser's engine idled, a low growl. And the man simply stood, silent, hands raised, as though he had seen this scene 100 times before. The older officer cleared his throat. "Do you have identification on you?" The man's jaw flexed. He moved slowly, deliberately, his voice steady. "I'm going to reach into my jacket pocket. There's a badge inside." Karen froze, her breath caught. "A badge?" The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. "Easy," he muttered. "Nice and slow." The man pulled out a worn leather folder. He flipped it open, revealing the gleam of a police shield. Under the wash of the cruiser's headlights, the metal caught every eye on the street. "Sergeant Marcus Williams," he said firmly. "City Police Department. I'm working an active investigation on a string of car thefts in this neighborhood. This vehicle," he gestured to the sedan, "was on my list tonight." The officers blinked. Their stances softened. One stepped closer to glance at the badge. His voice was different now, deferential. "Yes, Sergeant." "Understood." The crowd murmured. A neighbor whispered, "Wait, he's a cop?" Another, "Someone called him in?" From her window, Karen's face burned. Shame hit her stomach like a stone. She had not seen tools, not seen weapons, not heard threats. She had seen a black man in the dark, and she had called the police. Marcus slid the badge back into his jacket with a slow exhale. He met the officer's eyes, then turned his gaze, across the row of houses, pausing, unmistakably, at Karen's window. Her knees weakened. It was as though he could see her behind the blinds. The cruiser's lights dimmed. The officers exchanged awkward words with Marcus, then retreated a step, chastened. The crowd lingered on their porches, whispering. Karen paced inside her living room, her mind whirling. She rehearsed excuses. Anyone would have called. He was acting suspicious. How could I have known? But excuses crumbled under the weight of reality. She hadn't seen crime. She had seen color. Outside, Marcus spoke, his voice carrying through the night. I was doing my job, investigating thefts. What happened tonight tells a story. Not about me, but about how people see me. The murmurs grew heavier. A neighbor folded his arms tighter. Someone else nodded slowly. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Karen pressed her back to the wall, fighting tears. For the first time, she felt not like a protector of the neighborhood, but its betrayer. By morning, the story had spread. Someone had filmed the scene on a phone. The video traveled through Facebook groups and then into local news segments. Black officer mistaken for suspect in his own neighborhood investigation. The footage showed Marcus raising his hands, the badge flashing, the stunned silence of the officers. Some online comments defended the caller. Better safe than sorry. She was protecting her neighborhood. But most were harsher. This is what systemic bias looks like. Even a badge isn't enough. At the station, colleagues clapped Marcus on the shoulder, murmuring sympathy. He brushed them off. It wasn't new, he explained quietly. It was only louder this time. Karen, meanwhile, avoided eye contact at the grocery store. She kept her blinds shut during the day. She read every online comment with a sick knot in her gut. She had wanted to be seen as vigilant. Instead, she was a cautionary tale. A week later, the Homeowners Association hosted an emergency meeting at the school gym. Folding chairs lined the floor. The air smelled of dust and coffee in styrofoam cups. Marcus stood at the front in his uniform. The room quieted when he began to speak. I want to be clear, he said. I am not here to accuse or to shame. I am here because what happened last week is part of a larger problem. He paused, scanning the faces. Familiar suburban expressions, some tight with discomfort, others softened with guilt. When you see me, before you see the badge, you see a threat. That's not my imagination, it's my reality. It's the reality of millions of black men in this country. Even when we are your neighbors, even when we serve to protect you. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A man near the front muttered, That's not fair. But Marcus raised a hand. I know most of you don't think of yourselves as racist, but racism isn't only burning crosses, it's suspicion. It's fear that shows up in small choices, like calling the police on a man who belongs here as much as you do. The gym fell into silence. The truth landed heavy, undeniable. Karen sat in the back row, her hands trembling. Each word pierced her, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she saw Marcus not as a figure in the dark, but as a human being carrying a weight she had helped pile onto his shoulders. It took days for Karen to summon the courage. She rehearsed apologies in her bathroom mirror, discarded them, started again. Finally, one evening, she drove to the police station. Marcus stood outside near his cruiser, writing in a notebook. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lot. She stepped out of her car, her throat dry. Sergeant Williams? He looked up, guarded but calm. I wanted to apologize. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. I let fear decide for me. I saw your skin before I saw you. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. For a long moment, he said nothing. His eyes studied her, heavy with the weight of too many nights like this. Apologies are a start, he said finally. But change isn't words. It's what you do next time. It's how you teach your kids. It's whether you stand up when someone else does what you did. Tears blurred her vision. She nodded, understanding. I'll try. I will. Marcus gave a faint nod. That's all I can ask. She turned to leave, her heart still aching but lighter. And as Marcus slid into his cruiser, he allowed himself a small breath. The wound was real, but so was the possibility of healing. In Wellington Oaks, the lawns would still be green, the porches still bright at night, but maybe, just maybe, the people behind those blinds would begin to see differently. And perhaps one day a man like him would not need a badge to prove he belonged.